Welcome to ConstructTech TV. Today we will be looking at the top 5 tech trends for construction. This includes the infrastructure report card, a cybersecurity lab, standards for working at heights, the most inexpensive material for construction, and the top 3 ways to create a greener project. First, let's start with the infrastructure report card. The American Society for Civil Engineers releases its report card every 4 years. It grades 16 major infrastructure categories on a scale of A to F. Now, the 2017 grade is a D+. Now, that's a horrible grade, and it's calling for a $4.5 trillion investment to be made. This points to the need for funding and technology to improve our nation's infrastructure. President Trump is certainly talking about rebuilding America. Here to chat with me about it is Pat Jones, Executive Director and CEO of the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association. Pat, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, Pat, let's talk about what President Trump is actually doing and talking about infrastructure and the $1 trillion investment over, let's say, the next, I think it's 10 years or what we're doing. What's your thoughts on all of that?
Well, Peggy, we're very excited that President Trump has taken an interest in infrastructure and he's talking it up and he's brought a lot of voices into the conversation. We're still a little bit not sure exactly what it's going to look like. He's talked about $1 trillion over 10 years. He's talked about providing tax incentives to encourage private sector investment in transportation. But beyond that, we don't really know too much. So we're still waiting for the details to come out. But in the meantime, we are happy that infrastructure is part of the dialogue and that President Trump seems to be interested in doing something more than what's being done today.
Well, we know we talk about our roads and bridges and things like that. Our infrastructure is in a lot of trouble. Is $1 trillion even enough when we look at how crumbling and how much trouble we're in when we talk about infrastructure?
Peggy, that's a really good question. And you know, the American Society of Civil Engineers just came out last week or the week before with their 2017 report card, and they talked about how roads have a grade of D+. And, overall infrastructure has a grade of D, something along those lines. So we certainly need to invest a lot more. $1 trillion over 10 years would be a good start, but I'm not sure how far private sector investment will go in that $1 trillion. There's probably going to need to be a lot more public sector investment using taxes or general government funds to make this a reality.
So do you think maybe when you say the public, but do you think maybe we need to do public-private sector, a combination of both to maybe make this work? Because right now it's not going to be able to come from just one side or the other, but maybe a combination?
Well, my focus is on highways, bridges, and tunnels, surface transportation infrastructure. And the traditional source of funding for that has come from the gas tax, whether it's the federal gas tax that goes into the Federal Highway Trust Fund or state gas taxes. And they account for, fuel taxes account for probably 3/4 of the investment today in infrastructure. We will need to have private sector investment as well. And what that normally takes the form of is toll roads. Private sector investors will make an investment in a facility, but they expect to get their payback over time. So, and that's usually using tolls. It's a user fee. So I think we need to have a combination of those. When you talk about private-public partnerships or public-private partnerships, you're generally talking about investors putting money into building a new road or an asset lease of an existing facility and collecting the tolls over the time to recoup their investment.
If we're talking about the kind of this thing. How did we get to this mess? I mean, we've seen these roads being so bad. We've seen the infrastructure, and now we're talking about we want smarter cities. We want all this. You can't have everything that you want all of a sudden. And it seems like we're talking about we want these autonomous vehicles. We want these smarter cities. We want everything, but nobody wants to pay for it. So we've got this perfect storm kind of sorts. How are we going to accomplish what we want, yet it just seems like nobody wants to come up with the dollars for it all?
Well, Peggy, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Everybody wants more and better infrastructure, whether it's the power grid, whether it's wastewater treatment facilities, whether it's highways and bridges, whether it's rail, but nobody wants to pay for it. And I think the challenge is that we need to make a better case to the American public. And we need to engage them in conversation about the benefits that investment in infrastructure will have. People tend to think that when they send their money to Washington, a lot of people think it goes to waste. We don't know what happens to it. But with people in my industry, for instance, in the toll industry, when you get on a toll road, you can see where your tolls are going. You can see the investment. You can see the well-maintained pavement. You can see the ability that the toll operator has to clear snow in wintertime. Often toll facilities are the only roads that are operating in a severe snowstorm. So people need to be able to see with their own eyes where their investment is going. That's one of the reasons why I think toll facilities are so successful.
Have we done the right things of maximizing technology through the years when we talk about tolls and bridges? Because now we have sensors and things that can tell us when we have failing roads, when to go fix them. I mean, I live in the Midwest, so I understand, with potholes, the weather just, deteriorates our roads faster than we can think. But are we leveraging the technology for like self-healing roads and things like this to the best of our abilities?
Well, your question about technology really bleeds back into the last question you asked, and that was about investment. How did we get into this situation? And an important thing to remember is that our Federal Highway Trust Fund depends upon the federal gas tax, which has not been increased since 1993. We're talking about the Clinton administration, which was the last time the gas tax was increased. And as a result, the purchasing power of those gas taxes has declined by more than 40% as a result both of inflation and higher fuel economy. So first of all, we need more money coming into the system. We've got to increase the fuel tax, or we've got to do something else to increase the revenues. Secondly, the technology is a key part of that. Yes, we need to be able to get more capacity out of our existing system. When we start to platoon cars and platoon trucks, and they can take off from a red light, in unison, and they can drive on the highway with very little gaps between them, we'll have a lot more capacity on our roadway system without having to build new roads. So definitely the funding and the technology go hand in hand.
Pat, you've raised a lot of great ideas, and a lot of I hope you'll come back and talk to us, because it seems like there's so much more that we can drive some innovation, creative thinking with our young millennials who are coming out of school, and hopefully they'll help us as we continue to solve all of this. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Peggy, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Speaking of infrastructure, our next tech trend focuses on infrastructure security challenges. Cyber attacks are impacting companies across the globe. It is something that the construction industry needs to address, and some companies already are. For example, Bechtel has established a cybersecurity lab with George Mason University. The lab aims to protect equipment and software in critical infrastructure. The result will be a more secure infrastructure. I encourage you to keep an eye on what comes out of this amazing lab. It will certainly have an impact on the market in the very near future. Standards. We've all heard about their importance. But what about standards for working at heights? Aerial platforms are a dangerous place to work. The good news is that there are standards in place to make it a safer place to be. Currently, aerial lifts purchased before January 22, 1973 do not meet ANSI standards, and they may not be used unless they have been modified. Most of you probably don't have lifts from 4 decades ago, but these regulations are all set to change later this year. ANSI is going to come out with a new set of standards, and all aerial lifts will need to be upgraded. You might just want to check your lifts to make sure they are in compliance. What's the most inexpensive material for construction? A new study compared the cost between brick, precast concrete, metal panel curtain wall, and glass panel curtain wall systems. So which costs less? The results might surprise you. It certainly surprised me because brick actually costs less. Now, the study was conducted by the Brick Industry Association, and it compares total construction costs for the materials in 3-story office buildings, 3-story apartment buildings, 5 to 10-story office buildings, and 4 to 8-story hospitals, as well as 6-story dorms. Now, it is certainly a mouthful, but it was determined that brick is actually cheaper. So something to keep in mind for your next construction project. Have you ever given much thought to how you can create a greener project? Energy efficient material is certainly one, but our top 3 ways are all about technology. The first method starts at the very beginning, and that's with the design. Leveraging BIM and collaborating with other technologies can help create better building designs. This ultimately leads to a more efficient footprint. The second way is at the heart of construction, better project management and documentation. This technology can help manage all the green certification data, and it can also eliminate the stack of printouts in the office. This creates a greener project as well. Finally, it's addressing the long-term life cycle of a building. There are so many ways to do this. Bringing the smart grid into the project is maybe just one example. The U.S. Green Building Council has included this as part of the LEED version. The smart grid can also help create demand response programs that improve energy efficiency of a building or even a home. Building automation can also help create a more sustainable project. So there you have it, 3 key ways to create a greener project. It's better design, documentation, and smarter systems in the building. That's your tech update for today. While cameras are being used to monitor progress on the job site, these multi-purpose devices are serving an even greater role today. With trucks and cranes trying to maneuver through confined spaces, it can be difficult for operators to see what they are doing. That's where cameras come in. On today's Safety Zone, we will look at how portable cameras are ensuring everyone stays safe, from heavy equipment operators to those around them. Please welcome Chris Makhut, Chief Technology Officer from Niteris. Chris, why are cameras at the job site becoming so invaluable these days?
Well, we've gotten a lot of inquiries in the past regarding cameras on construction sites, primarily because of the nature of the buildings and structures that a lot of the heavy equipment is beginning to work with. They are tending to be more complex, larger in size, and general contractors and site supervisors are finding the need to increase safety for their operations to allow their job site to see more of what's going on and what is actually transpiring on the site.
So that leads to a great question. How does a camera on that crane then that you were kind of alluding to make it safer when you're working in the total job site itself?
Well, if you can kind of imagine, if you've never been a crane operator, if you can imagine moving something from behind another building, or positioning a load that's very far away from you that you can't see, that you're relying on someone else's eyes to be able to direct you where to go, how you need to get there, and just that radio communication, it provides a good means for maneuvering the load, but not sufficient enough to get the load there in a timely manner and in a safe manner. Because you're technically, as the operator, you're relying on the eyes of somebody else to position and orient that load to where it needs to go on the site.
Let's talk about an example. Can you give me an example of kind of like the data analytics or the time saving, the safety? I know it's a lot all in one question, but can you give me something that for our viewers to understand?
Sure. So we've actually found that just using a camera system on a crane, especially in the aspect of working with blind picks, can increase productivity of that crane and ultimately the job site anywhere from 20 to 40%. It really depends on what the crane is picking, where they're picking it from, and where they're maneuvering it from. These cameras basically put the operator's eyes wherever he needs to put them, so then he can actually see what's going on. From there are cameras as well that can actually scan and analyze the job site from the crane's point of view in terms of doing object detection, of identifying personnel on the site.
Well, you made an interesting point. So in the future about kind of sensing, will these be able to sense a person in the future when we're looking out for safety purposes, these cameras?
I would imagine so. So one of the things, some of the feedback that we get from some general contractors is not necessarily like removing the operator from the crane or having a human being operating the crane, but actually getting the operator out of the crane. So we've seen at least some interest with regards to that in terms of high tech, of actually getting the operator on the ground and actually having the operator remotely control the equipment.
So where do you see cameras on the job site going in the future? What's your big vision, so to speak, of a camera in the future?
A camera in the future, I think, is going to be, and actually this is just cameras in general on the job site, are starting now to generate a lot of data. And this is often referred to as big data. This big data is not only a blessing, but it can also be a curse. You can imagine if you have a camera system such as a hoist cam on a crane, or you have a drone flying over the job site, or using cell phones to take pictures, or you have the security cameras to show the stop motion animation of maybe the building go up and down, or being constructed in a virtual fast forward. This can be a very, very big challenge for a lot of management to be able to digest and ingest all that data. So what we're finding is the need to actually crunch this data faster, to tie all this data and information together so that it's more accessible, and so then management can make better, more informed decisions.
Well, Chris, this has been great, and we hope that everyone here gets a better view of the job site and cameras of the future. So thank you so much for being with us with that's our safety zone for today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
LPR Construction was established in 1979. Starting as a steel erector, it has expanded its offering to include industrial service. The company also has an employee ownership program. LPR is a company that invests heavily in its employees. It also invests in technology. Here to talk all about it is Thad Ludkins, Director of Equipment and IT. Thad, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Peggy.
So Thad, when your company started, it was much smaller. Now it's pretty much grown like 10 times. How does a company do that?
Well, it invests in its employees. That's something that we really are key on. And being an ESOP, we actually have skin in the game. As an employee owner, we have key employees that we offer stock up to, and they become part of the ownership and the direction of the company.
So let's talk about that. When you have employees that really have, as you call it, skin in the game, these are employees that not only have a heart about the profitability, but they really want to look at the right technology and the right projects. How do they go about finding that, and where are they looking for these things?
We have a really good atmosphere as far as technology adoption within LPR. We have a tendency, we have a pre-construction department that is very on the edge of, leading edge of that part of the company. We're using a lot of BIM, we're using a lot of 3D modeling, and we're actually doing, we're taking some of those 3D models and we're doing as-builts and surveying the project, so we know exactly where we're at, how we've done, and what sort of progress we're making on the job.
So you're looking at the trends that are out there in technology to help you decide whether you're using BIM or virtual reality, whatever technology you see, and you say, are these going to be the right trends for us to kind of help us advance technology and look at cutting edge? Because right now we have a lot of millennials that you want to be able to draw into your company as an employee owned, right?
Absolutely. We're always looking for new blood within the organization. It is, as you know, the industry is having difficulties getting new employees within the younger generation. There's always been this this thought that construction is lagging behind and doesn't invest in technology. But I beg to differ. We're really investing a lot of money into technology. The margins are so thin that we absolutely have to engage in this and actually spend some money and get more technology in the hands of our employees. And it is attracting a lot more millennials along the way.
Well, it's not. You know, we've always had this idea that construction is this blue collar, but now we're using very sophisticated technology, from drones to virtual reality, AI, and we're able to see millennials do some amazing things on the job site, correct?
Absolutely. Construction's in the front line when it comes to this. When you start looking at the investments and the technologies that are being used right now, when you do look at drones are going to be a huge component as far as I've seen demonstrations where they're doing surveying as they flies through a project. It's something that is it's going to change. It's going to be a game changer when it comes to the future and how profitable a construction company can be.
Your company right now, the things that you're doing, applying BIM, how has it made LPR so successful in the way you do things? For example, you guys use tablets in ways that most companies have never been able to do. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the tablets, we actually have been able to bring our drawings and take our drawings and download them to our tablets. So, for instance, we have one project in which we have 10,000 drawings.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing that we're able to get that much data into one tablet and have access to it. As long as it's tagged, the drawings are tagged, and they're easily searched, we can target and hand it to our superintendents, and our superintendents and foremen can have the data right in the hand instantaneously. The collaboration with the tablets is amazing as well. We're able to take a picture of an issue that we have on the job, share it amongst all of the tablets on site, and then we can question the customer and send the RFI to him and have an immediate response.
So when you look at all the things that you guys have been able to do from when you first started to what you're doing, how much have you seen LPR advance in looking at technology from where you've been to where you are now to where you see the future in trying to grow the company and actually what your customers see?
Oh, it's been a long road for sure, but I've seen from the point of time when we initially started adopting technology to where we're at right now, the changes have been phenomenal. We've seen the beginning of our company where we started using an ERP system, and that was foreign to us. We didn't know about budgeting. We didn't know about job costing. All of that stuff was new to us, but now that's something that we have to have. And in order for us to survive, we have to continue using technology. If we want to be competitive in the market, we have to incorporate some of these newer things that are happening. And our company realizes that. That's something they do invest in. They invest heavily. Like you said before, we've spent quite a bit of money on this, but we've seen returns tenfold on that.
Well, Thad, it's been so great having you on the show and the program today, because as we see companies like LPR Construction advancing in technology, that's why you are someone you should know. Well, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Peggy. Appreciate it.
It's great. Today we are talking about technology from a company that is bringing new life to demolition. Back in 1976, after a dangerous job in Sweden, two companies joined forces to make a destructive tool safer. 40 years later, Brach has mastered the art of remote-controlled demolition by taking machines a step further by introducing smarter solutions to the job site. To tell us all about it, please welcome Peter Bigwood, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Brach Inc. How are robots actually affecting demolition as we talk about that? Let's, because I know robots at the construction site and demolition, and that's what you specialize. Let's really talk about that.
Okay, yeah, sure. Demolition robots, of course, have been around for quite a while. We've been making them since 1976, but the popularity, what we're seeing now, certainly in the last few years, has been a real increase in popularity. And I think there are several macro trends which are affecting this. Probably the most important is the worker safety. Worker safety and corollary to that, worker productivity, and then some basic issues of worker availability. So safety, of course, a demolition robot, strictly speaking, you are operating it, but you're operating it from a distance. So though they're called demolition robots, a more accurate term is remote-controlled demolition machine. But when they're working, they look like robots. But the guy operating them is actually operating joysticks as if he were operating a normal piece of, an excavator, a mini excavator, or a bobcat, or something like that. So the first thing that affects the work site is that the person operating the demolition robot is out of harm's way. So if there's any falling debris, any risk of, say, a wall falling in on the equipment, that person is not at risk. And that's huge. We see robots on the edges of bridge decks doing cleanup work, removing material from the edges. Well, obviously, you'd really rather not be inside that machine if it were ever to tumble over the side. So safety is a big deal.
So when we talk about this with safety, I mean, you really have to be trained a certain way. Your job sites have to be done a certain way. So have we evolved now with these demolition robots to a way now that we're seeing job sites change with using these machines?
To a certain extent, you can do things with demolition robots, which of course you can't do with traditional equipment. And so people who are aware of the applications will certainly design in, using or applying the demolition robot. And a perfect example is in a what's called a top-down demolition. If you've got a high-rise building that you need to take down and you can't reach it with a high-reach excavator, or if the floor loads are such that you can't put in a big, heavy excavator with a big hydraulic breaker on it, well, then clearly the way to do it is to bring in a demolition robot, which are renowned for their power-to-weight ratio. So that a 5-ton demolition robot will hit as hard as mounted with a hydraulic breaker, will hit as hard as a 15-ton, let's say a PC 160. Komatsu PC-160 would be typical. So a 5-ton demolition robot can hit every bit as hard as a 16-ton excavator. And so, yes, you would design your job in such a way that you would bring in these lighter weight demolition robots, and they would still give you the power you need to bring a building like that down in a systematic way, what we call a munch down.
So you talk about that. Those are some common applications that you might use some of these robots. What might that be? Because I know you've done some work when you were doing the cleanup after 9/11 and things like that. What are some things for those who might be watching, say, this is where I need to be looking at some of the demolition robots? Because you have a variety of robots, demolition robots.
That's right. Well, they range in size from just a half a ton to 12 tons. So the little half a ton, in fact, the smallest 3 units that we make will actually fit through a standard doorway. So you can go in all kinds of interior demolition confined space type areas, tanks, things like that. But yeah, traditional applications for demolition robots would be tunnels, mining, concrete cutting, again, interior work, demolition work, hot areas, steel mills, foundries, anywhere again where the safety of the operator is paramount. That's where you would find these machines. And the beauty of it is that you don't just put a hydraulic breaker on them. You can put grapples, rock drills, buckets, of course, digging buckets, traditional digging buckets, crushers, scabblers, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, and then the most exotic would be nuclear. For obvious reasons, you really wouldn't want to be in some of these heavy radiation areas, and so demolition robots are very commonly used in those situations.
So now you talk about these kind of demolition, but then you also mentioned hydro demolition. Are there advantages or disadvantages to these things that you're mentioning right now that we need to really understand?
Well, yes, hydro demolition, which has also been around for quite a while, probably almost 30 years, is where you use very, very high pressure water through a very small, like 3-millimeter nozzle, and it's directed against concrete. And this approach is used almost exclusively for removing concrete, with the added benefit that you leave the rebar not only untouched, but actually cleaned and descaled, so ready for the next pour of concrete. So hydro demolition is used in areas where you're really renovating the concrete as opposed to demolishing the entire structure.
And that's the kind of stuff that we talked about when we got together. We talked about how that's you're kind of saving a lot of things. You're not having to destroy everything. You're really getting an opportunity to kind of save a lot of that concrete that's out there.
Exactly. So, a classic example for hydro demolition would be a bridge deck, where the concrete is deteriorated and needs a new pour of concrete. But you don't want to go in and take down the entire bridge. I mean, the rest of the structure is fine. It's just that the concrete at the surface down 2, 3, 4 inches is bad. And the beauty of hydro demolition is that you can set it in such a way that when you make your pass over the lane, say an 8-foot wide lane, you're removing the bad concrete, but leaving the sound concrete intact, along with, as I mentioned before, the rebar. So once you're done, you haven't caused any microfracturing, which you would do if you were using jackhammers, or frankly, if you were using a demolition robot, which again relies on a mechanical means of breaking the concrete. But by using water, you're removing the material, in effect deconstructing the concrete, leaving it in its component parts, slurry, aggregate. And once you remove that, you are primed and ready to pour on an extremely good surface for the new concrete. And so, yeah, it lends itself perfectly to renovation, remediation. Frankly, what we're all looking at in the U.S. these days which is improving the infrastructure, but doing it in an efficient way. And of course, you're doing it with maybe 2 or 3 people doing that job, as opposed to maybe 10 guys with jackhammers, which is hard to find, first of all.
Exactly. Well, Peter, you know what? We're out of time, but thank you so much for being with us, and we appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, we enjoyed it. All right. Well, that's our tech innovation for today. Many of you might remember our last Got a Tool. We invited George Matthew, Chairman and CEO of Kesbury, to talk all about the market for drones. Well, on this show, we're going to actually continue that conversation as we look at the importance of big data and all about why alliances are so important. So let's look at what George Matthew had to say. Many of you remember on our last Got a Tool, we were talking with George Matthew, Chairman and CEO of Kesbury. George is here, and we're continuing that conversation, and we're all talking about the importance this time of big data and the alliances that are being formed when you talk about drones. George, thank you for continuing our conversation.
Oh, great to be back, Patty. Thank you.
George, it's really exciting because when we think about drones, drones are really changing the construction job site, and there's a lot of things when you collect all this big data now from the job site. And now a lot of big alliances are being formed to make a lot of that information collected and being able to do so much more. Let's talk about what that means, because at Kesbury, you guys are doing a lot of really important things, and you see the importance of alliances being that next big step with what drones are going to be doing.
Sure. When we think about our ability to be successful in terms of the construction industry, construction itself is a massive industry in the United States and across the world. But one of the real challenges in these large industries is how do you form the proper level of distribution capability in market. So we're really proud of the opportunity to serve John Deere in this regard. They have an enormous distribution capability worldwide. There is an absolute need to be able to introduce a drone that can autonomously work on behalf of the data that's effectively being collected on a consistent basis effectively on that work site. And now you're seeing the match between this great leading brand in the construction industry being able to complement the capabilities that they already have from an equipment, service, data analytics standpoint with the Kesbury drone and the solution that we're delivering into market. So we can't be more proud of the opportunity to serve the market accordingly, and of course serving it with John Deere being our go-to-market partner.
Will there be others? I mean, it's probably you just formed this one, but it's probably you have to be looking at others. But right now, you're just probably trying to figure out all the things you'll be doing with John Deere.
I think the focus for us from an equipment standpoint is going to be surrounding John Deere and the capabilities and the network that they're introducing, particularly from a distribution standpoint for the foreseeable future. We do see other opportunities, particularly when it comes to a lot of the software integration, right? So when you think about project management software, when you think about the capabilities of how you're understanding the BIM itself and how you're tracking the forward nature of how work is progressing on a construction effort, that's where you see real opportunity to get the data that's generated from the drone directly onto those information systems. And so yes, we do see some downstream opportunities, particularly for partnering with the software providers that are delivering either project management or planning capabilities, particularly in the construction industry.
Do you think right now when we talk about this entire construction industry that it's moving at the rate you would like to see it? Because when we talk about big data, I think the construction industry still has a lot to learn about how to capture data, integrate the data, use the data in a way that's useful information and not just being overwhelmed by what data means for them in a way that they can actually maximize it to make it profitable information?
Yeah, I think that in any industry there are these moments where you're trying to figure out where you can valuably use tools, data effectively for making these changes continue to progress forward. Now, in the construction industry, there has been just the way things have been continuously done for quite a while, where the introduction of a new tool, a new service, capabilities from a data analytics standpoint really need to plug into the rest of the fabric of how things work. And so I think we're now at that juncture, right? I think we have now this sort of moment in time where the analytics that are being provided, particularly off of data that's coming off the drone, the data that's being generated from the equipment itself, the project management solutions, these are all being thought of as one integrated workflow, one integrated experience for how work is accomplished. And so we are at that juncture right now. We are at that turning point where I believe that this is actually going to accelerate further in the industry than ever before. So we can't be more excited for the moment that we've now entered, particularly with the Caspre drone helping our customers and the distributors surrounding John Deere serve this market accordingly.
And that's what's so exciting when you look at a platform, when you look at software, hardware, applications. Is that really the secret sauce, so to speak, for what you're bringing to market and being able to do alliances with a John Deere, that you really are bringing a whole package that makes what you do unique, and then have an alliance like that says, look, we're able to bring something to the construction space that makes it somewhat unique and special all at the same time?
Yeah, so we think that a complete working solution is important, in particularly the construction industry. So the industry is focused on building, right? The industry is not focused on trying to manually pilot a drone. The industry is not focused on finagling with software to ensure that it works properly when it's expected and supposed to. And so we have to plug into the natural workflow of how things are accomplished on a work site or on a building project or within the information systems that surround all of that work. And if it's discombobulated, it's disconnected, it's a broken experience, then no one's going to accept that in the industry. And so this is where the Caspre drone has been very unique and differentiated in the market, because we are able to effectively plug in to the rest of the way that work gets accomplished. And I think that's where we're seeing the growth in our own business in that respective space.
So where do you see Caspre going next? I mean, what's the big next thing? Tell us here, we want to know on Got a Tool. We've got to know the secrets.
Yeah, so I think the biggest area that we're continuing to evolve is how artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities are continuously being introduced into the worksite. So when we look at planning applications, when we look at when there's a project underway and you want to identify the amount of assets that you have simultaneously that are effectively on that work site, you can actually use the drone to do not only the visual inspection, but really real-time classification of, say, for instance, what equipment that you have underway. You can use the drone to be able to do all kinds of planning assumptions being understood in comparison to what's actually happening on the work site itself. So no surprise, it's a further integration of the data that's generated from the drone being more fully integrated to the experience of how that work site and the work there is being accomplished. And that's where Caspre is going to continuously be focused for the foreseeable future.
Who'd have thought that a drone might be just as important as a hammer on a job site, right?
Well, I think this comes down to the question of tools, right? Because every generation we see tools continuing to evolve in a market. So if you look at the survey grading space in the construction arena for earthworks, historically in the 50s it was theodolite that was used for surveying, right? And then you start to see the emergence of GPS backpacks in the 80s and 90s. And then of course more recently you have survey grade equipment that's using laser finders to be able to accomplish the understanding of where distance and measurement would occur on a more accurate basis. And this is just the next natural extension. The drone is now the hyper accurate view of that survey and measurement capability that just happens to be delivered aerially versus being able to do it on the ground with the equipment that's previously served that market. So this is just a natural evolution how the market continues to evolve.
I love it, George. We wish you guys continued success. Thank you for being with us. And that's what it all is about with Got a Tool for today. Thank you.
Peggy.
Did you know that 837 people were killed on the job site in 2014 and another 330,000 were injured? This can be the result of slips and falls, extreme weather, or poor worker health. Now I want to give you a scenario. I want you to give some thought on how you might respond if one of your coworkers gets injured. Now, this coworker is removing a coal tar pitch roof. He is wearing a suit and a full-face respirator. The temperature is more than 90 degrees, and he has been working in direct sunlight. Near the end of the day, he says he is cramping up, he feels dizzy, and he has a bad headache. He also is sweating. What would you do? Now, I want you to take a moment just to think about this scenario. The National Safety Council offers some insight and some recommendations. Before providing first aid, you should assist him to a cool place and ask permission to administer first aid before doing anything. Next, remove his suit and outer clothing. Attempt to cool him by using cool water spray and a wet cloth on the forehead and body. Finally, give him a sports drink to rehydrate, which is very important. Other options you might consider are 2% milk, if you have it, coconut water, or just water in general. Knowing how to prevent deaths on the job site is very essential. And the National Safety Council provides this type of training. Contact your local chapter to get started with this training and other training as well. It might just save a life. That's your Learn It for today. Today's word of the day is telematics. Many analysts in the Internet of Things may think of transportation when they hear that word. But as a construction professional, I would guess that you think of equipment. Telematics is not a new technology. In fact, development began in the 1980s when the European Parliament was looking to promote road safety. Studies were done to see how technology could help. Then in 1992, a European treaty was signed to spur more research in telematics. Today, telematics is making a resurgence of sorts. So what is telematics? It actually collects and disseminates data from a piece of equipment. Here's how it works. Hardware is installed on an asset and it collects data about that piece of equipment. The information is then transmitted via a cellular or satellite signal. Analytics can then be leveraged to make a real-time decision. It's that simple. And today, many manufacturers include telematics systems standard on any new system or equipment. Are you taking advantage of this technology? Telematics. That's your word of the day. And thanks for watching Construct Tech TV, where we're talking tech at the job site.